Arthur, thank you for your time. It's really a pleasure to sit down and talk to you at the end of your 3 years here as ambassador. One of the things I really want to ask you about is, of course, we're discussing AUKUS. And so many people have told me that this is a remarkable moment meeting history, in that I've had people tell me that even like 7 years ago, the Australian government approached the US about nuclear technology and we were basically laughed out of the room. What do you think's changed so much in that time?
A couple of things have changed. In Australia's case, our strategic circumstances in the region were changing far more quickly than we anticipated even a few years ago. So the sort of trends we were seeing are just accelerating. When we put out the Defence Strategic Update in 2020, at that stage we said things were picking up pace. Since then, that's accelerated. And I think the then government decided to review our options in the light of that and to see whether there was a more effective capability that we could put into the water than what was in prospect then, both in terms of lethality, mode of operation, area of operation, and all the rest of it. And so that government had kicked off this process of looking at potential alternatives, beginning with what might be the next generation British boat. But because the technology is an American technology, that inevitably meant speaking with the Americans. The nuclear technology is their crown jewels. Their nuclear navy has met the highest standards of safety and performance under Hyman Rickover, who set it up. So we approached the US about that, initially sort of navy to navy. It was pretty clear that the nuclear navy was saying, well, look, do you understand the full extent of what you're potentially taking on? The shorthand for that is nuclear stewardship. You know, the capacity to operate, look after this sort of capability, what it will mean in terms of workforce, not just on the subs themselves, but also the supporting workforce. They were really giving us a sense that this was going to have to be a whole-of-nation effort, a moonshot, as I've described it before. And once the strategic people in the White House and elsewhere started to focus on this, I think they got quite excited about the message this would send to the region, about our capacity as allies and partners to work together, putting more capability into the region, and having an industrial base that would mean that we could supply additional capacity into the region that was not anticipated even a few years ago. President Biden spent a fair bit of time thinking about this because he has his own nuclear.
So that's interesting what you say about the US kind of taking it more seriously when they realised the strategic benefits of focusing on the region is. How realistic do they think an actual conflict with China is in that region?
The basis we're all working on is to actually create a deterrent so that without focusing on any one particular country, there's an understanding that we have a strong defence, we have a strong offence, and that we're prepared to stand up for what we believe in. And I think if we do that and create a strong deterrent, I think it'll help obviate the possibility that you do get conflict. Now, we can't be Pollyannish about this, but neither by the same token do we need to go off the edge. It's not just about having military hardware. There's all the elements of statecraft, of diplomacy, economic and trade engagement. All of this plays into creating what one would hope is the basis for a peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific. As Australians, we're serious about playing our role in upholding the global rules-based order. That's something that's been of great benefit to Australia. The US is an important element of upholding the global rules-based order. And our alliance with the US is not based on sentimentality or whatever. It's based on a very strong and pragmatic calculation about what is in our national interest.
This has been an interesting agreement in that the announcement came out kind of out of the blue for the rest of us. It was done in such secrecy, and then it was like you decided on the what but not the how. So you spent the last 18 months discussing the actual how. Has there been any point where it felt like the wheels might come off, that there might be some kind of impasse that you couldn't get over?
Failure is not an option. So I think the view was, having gone out there and made this big bet in September 2021, we now had to deliver. So Admiral Meade in Australia and his colleagues in the US and the UK, I think have worked assiduously to try and define what we call an optimal pathway, which is not about what the final design is. It's all about the interim steps of how we build up a capability that allows us to be able to deliver that final design, and also what steps we take to fill the capability gap until we're ready to take delivery of the final design submarine. But if we do it right, the spillover benefits to the rest of the economy will be substantial in terms of the impact it has on training and education in the workforce, the capacity to drive smart manufacturing more broadly. So actually I'm quite excited about what it means. It's a challenge and an opportunity for Australia.
How much is it going to cost?
It'll mean a lift in Australian defence spending, a further lift in Australian defence spending. But again, these are details to be released in due course. But the reality is that Australian defence spending is going to have to go up, and AUKUS is a driver of that. There's also a Defence Strategic Review, but I think to the maximum extent possible the government will be looking at how potentially in that context there are trade-offs and choices that can be made. So if we're going in new directions under that review, that's being paid for in other ways. I think what we're seeing around the world, we're in good company here, whether it's Germany or Japan, countries are increasing their spending, aiming for 2% of GDP or more. So I don't think, so we're not Robinson Crusoe. I think you'll find we're all in the same boat, but I think from our perspective, it's not just spending, it's an investment. It's an investment in a more secure future.